My husband and I have been married for almost 3 years, and it's been a happy marriage, or so I thought. My husband never expressed any unhappiness or discontent with his life, and as a matter of fact, always seems very joyful. We'd known each other for the past 7 years and had been together for 5. We used to go out on dates regularly, and we even got along well with each other's families. So, in short, we had a perfect marriage. I believed that was because of how much we loved each other, but yesterday, that changed. I wanted to purchase tickets for a concert, but my phone was really slow, so I decided to use my husband's phone instead. I didn't ask him since he was in the shower, and well, honestly, I didn't think this was significant enough for me to ask about. So I bought the tickets and I opened his text inbox to check the confirmation message, which is when I found a text from one of his coworkers. Curiosity got the better of me and I ended up clicking on it, and I saw that she'd written about how much she loved my husband and how she couldn't wait to see him on Monday. I was a little confused, and so I decided to scroll further up to see what exactly they'd been talking about. I was incredibly shocked to see weeks and weeks worth of messages exchanged where they talk about how much they enjoyed spending time with each other, how they felt like soulmates, and all sorts of other flirtatious stuff. I was devastated to find such texts. And what was even more disturbing was that some of these things were things that he'd also say to me. But in my case, it's all right because I'm his wife. Reading him say the same exact things to some other woman literally felt like my heart was being ripped out of my chest. After forwarding those texts and screenshots to my own phone, I kept his phone aside and prepared to confront him about it as soon as he came out of that shower. I felt angry, hurt, and betrayed all at once, and I honestly didn't know how to react to any of this. As soon as he came out of the shower and saw me with his phone in my hand, sobbing, he rushed to my side and asked me what happened. So I showed him what I found, and he got defensive almost within seconds. He snatched his phone away and told me that I had no right to go snooping through his phone and that this was an invasion of his privacy. I ignored all of that and asked him about the texts I found and demanded an explanation, even though deep down I knew that no explanation could ever justify this. He told me that she was just a friend and there was nothing more to it. He even added that she's married as well, so this means nothing, as if that was supposed to make it better. I didn't buy the whole just friends stuff, and I told him as much, but he was acting like none of this was a big deal at all. He told me that they'd only been texting for a few weeks, and that's all it was, texts. They would just talk and maybe flirt a little, but nothing more. But I knew for a fact that there were emotions involved, since he himself had confessed that he had feelings for her in those texts, and she had too. He claimed that he hasn't even let her touch him, so he hasn't acted upon those feelings, and as long as he doesn't act upon it, it's all right. I couldn't believe that he was saying this, and none of it made sense to me. I told him that I needed some time away, and even then, I don't know if I'd be able to forgive him for doing this to me. Even if I had assumed that what he said about not being physically involved with that woman was true, they're still emotionally attached. And as his wife, I don't know if I could just accept that. He told me that I was overreacting and taking things too far when this was nothing but just a bit of harmless flirting, which just made me wonder how many times he's done this over the years. Had I not checked his phone, I would never have learned that this was going on behind my back, since his behavior with me at home literally betrayed nothing. He seemed perfectly happy with me, and we'd even been on a date to a fancy new restaurant a few days ago to keep the romance alive. And after we came back home, he continued to flirt with his coworker as if it was totally normal to do so. My husband and I got into a huge fight where he accused me of exaggerating and said that I was making a mountain out of a molehill. He kept saying that since he hadn't done anything with his coworker, it's not even cheating and there's no reason for me to act like he's betraying my trust. He even said that even though he has feelings for this woman, he still loves me more and wants to stay married since he knows that he's probably either just infatuated with her or attracted to her, which will pass eventually. But he just doesn't seem to understand that the fact that he is so emotionally attached to another woman has made me feel disrespected in my marriage, and I can't see him in the same light anymore. It's been almost close to 7 hours since I left and came in with my parents a few minutes ago. I finally told them exactly why I'd come to live with them. I explained the whole cheating situation to them, and they were shocked that my husband, who had seemed to have been the perfect man for me, could have done something like this. They were obviously livid and demanded that I file for divorce immediately. They reassured me that I was certainly not overreacting, and I've also learned that be it physical or emotional, cheating is inexcusable. Them telling me that what my husband had done was wrong did a lot to reassure me, since I'd been questioning my own decisions and sanity because of how hard my husband was trying to downplay the seriousness of his affair. My husband hadn't apologized even once by then, but had only been texting me to gaslight me into thinking that I was overreacting somehow. He kept telling me that since nothing physical had happened, it was all right. He even said that if I hadn't gone snooping through his phone without asking him first, then I never would have found out about this, and we wouldn't be fighting about something so petty and unnecessary right now. After I didn't respond, despite him sending me several messages consecutively within a matter of minutes, he decided to threaten to ruin my reputation if I filed for divorce. He called me up and told me that if I did anything that could ruin our marriage, then he would make sure that he spreads the nastiest rumors about me that he can think of, and then I'd be left with absolutely nothing. I was furious that he dared to threaten me despite what he'd done, and felt nothing but pure hatred for this man I'd given up everything for just a few hours before. Anyway, I'd had enough of his bull crap, so in a fit of anger, I hung up and then I forwarded the texts from his phone to the only person who he still feels answerable to, his mother. My mother-in-law and I aren't particularly close, but I know for a fact that the only person my husband is afraid of is his mother. So the only way to get him to realize his mistake and leave me alone was to tell his mom. I could have just let it slide, but the fact that he was trying to manipulate me into thinking that I was somehow being too emotional just didn't sit right with me. I'd given this relationship my all, and he'd gone ahead and cheated on me despite everything that I'd done for him. I was so angry that I just couldn't let it go. So I did something petty, and I'm kind of glad that I did, truth be told. At least I'm getting back at him in some way, even if it's just telling his mom about what he's done. And today I learned that apparently I've created a huge mess for my husband by informing his mother about what had happened. After forwarding her those messages last evening, I'd called his mom and told her everything that had happened so far, including the emotional affair and the gaslighting and my decision to leave. I also made sure to include the fact that her son had actually had the audacity to threaten me when I refused to respond to his messages. Just as I'd suspected, he himself hadn't told his mom anything at all, probably out of fear about how she'd react. After overcoming the initial shock of learning such awful things about her own son, she spoke to me quite calmly and thanked me for informing her, reassuring me that after today, her son wouldn't bother me anymore. And then this morning, my husband called me up sobbing and begging me to call his mother up and tell her that I lied since he received a call from his family lawyer a few minutes back and was told that his mother had decided to cut him out of her will and he just lost the entirety of his inheritance except for the money and an old beach house in Cabo that his dad had left him. I was really confused as to why my mother in law would take such an extreme step because, in spite of what he'd done to me, he was still her only child. And it just didn't add up. I thought that she'd just make him stop bothering me. But this was way more than that, and I could sense that there was something deeper. So I asked my aunt, who had a few common friends with my mother in law ages ago, about what the reason could be. And she told me some things about my husband's family, which finally helped me understand why she did what she did. For some context, my husband's parents had separated when he was very young, but he'd never told me why. He was raised by his mother, who had built a business from scratch and was the founder of one of the biggest makeup companies in the country. His dad was also quite a successful businessman, but not even close to his mother. His mom was a formidable woman, and she'd always been strict while he was growing up, while his dad was more of a fun parent. They'd never formally divorced, but just lived separately and continued to co-parent their son. Only today did I learn that the real reason his parents had separated was because his mother had caught his father cheating on her. She didn't file for divorce since that would lead to a custody battle and she didn't want that to affect her son, but she couldn't continue living with my husband's father either, so she left and started working. His dad only visited him on the weekends and spoiled him rotten, which is why my husband grew to fear his mom and adore his dad. My husband had always known that his mom had been cheated on, but that didn't stop him from claiming that his father was absolutely perfect. I'd always just assumed that my mother in law lived separately because they must have had problems in their marriage, but didn't even imagine that it could have been cheating. Just because of how highly my husband spoke of his father. I guess now it all adds up. The cheating apple doesn't fall far from the cheating tree. But anyway, my husband sounded practically hysterical on the call, and I was actually kind of scared of what he might do. So I told him to calm down and see what I could do to fix things, since, in spite of everything that had happened so far, I still had been married to this man for so many beautiful years. However, now that I know why his mother did what she did, I don't feel the need to fix anything at all. In fact, I feel kind of great about the fact that this is happening to him right now, and don't think I should lie to my mother in law at all, because this is exactly what my husband deserves. I know I'm being petty though, and he's losing out on an absolute fortune, so I just wanted to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. So, AITA for not wanting to cover up for my husband and lie to my mother in law after he cheated on me? Update 1. I decided not to tell my mother in law that I lied to cover up for my husband. He's just facing the consequences of his own actions, and he has nobody to blame apart from himself. I know this is going to sound petty as hell, but I'm actually happy that she decided to cut him out of her will. We've never been close, but this feels like the biggest show of support I could have ever expected from another woman, and I'm forever going to be grateful to my mother in law for standing up for me against her own son. I know it couldn't have been easy for her, just as it isn't easy for me. I'm just going to sit back and let karma do its work, since none of this is my fault. I've also filed for divorce, and while my husband is doing everything in his power to convince me to stop, ranging from his threats to hurt me to sobbing and begging me to come back, I've made it clear that this is happening. My parents are also quite supportive of this move and have told me that I can stay with them for as long as I need to until I find a place of my own. I quit my job a year after I got married since my husband wanted me to take care of the house, and I agreed since I didn't particularly love my job either, and I was okay with being a housewife. And I liked the thought of making our home a beautiful place for my husband to come back to. I'd also planned to have a baby in the next few years, but clearly that isn't happening anymore. I've started looking for jobs now, though, to get my life back on track, and I sort of regret giving up 2 years that I could have spent working on my career for that man who, as it turns out, didn't even value anything I did for him. My husband is furious since I texted him one last time and told him that now that I know what his mother went through, I'm not telling her that I lied or taking back what I said. He tried to argue with me, saying that I was being heartless and he didn't deserve this just for a bit of harmless flirting with a coworker. That seemed funny to me since it wasn't just harmless flirting, but a full-fledged emotional affair. I'd read up on the internet about it a few days after I left his place, and I'm convinced that had I not left, he would have continued cheating on me with either his coworker or maybe even multiple other women, and I'd never be able to find out. I made it very clear that his mother had done the right thing by cutting him out of her will, and he deserves it. I also made sure to add that if he called me again, then I'd also be filing for a restraining order against him, and that won't look too good for him. I reminded him that it was not just the affair, but also the fact that he threatened to ruin my reputation and even hurt me in whatever way I could if I filed for divorce. So he could safely assume that I was not going to do anything to help him out this point onwards. It's been an hour since then, and I finally blocked him everywhere. The next time I see him is going to be in court in a couple of days, so I'm just trying to mentally prepare myself for that. On a happier note, I have a job interview with quite a reputable company the next morning, so I'm just hoping that I can put this whole thing out of my mind for a day and just focus on the upcoming interview since this is my first one after a really long time. Update 2. Something really scary happened today, and I'm actually shaking while I'm typing this out right now. As I said earlier, I had an interview today and it went pretty well. As I was leaving the building, I had this feeling that someone was watching me, but I just thought that I was feeling extra paranoid since I'd left the house after so long. As soon as I got to my car, I felt someone grab me, and it was only because of my years of training in martial arts that I was able to defend myself. I turned around to find myself face to face with my husband, who looked like he could hurt me. I'd caught him by surprise, so it took me seconds to push him away and get into my car. I locked it instantly while he tried to open the door. I drove away as fast as I could, and I saw my husband fall back, but I didn't wait to see if he was hurt or not, and just drove on and waited a few miles away from the building. As soon as I heard the sirens, I drove back to the building, and thankfully, my husband had been hurt by the force with which I'd driven away and was lying on the ground since his foot was a bit hurt. I told the cops what had happened, and they arrested him immediately, which made me feel a little relieved. Even while he was in pain, he kept cursing at me and accusing me of ruining his life. I was so shocked that this man had become so unhinged over his inheritance that he was willing to actually hurt me physically. I came back home just an hour ago and have been trying to calm myself down. I'm obviously already pretty stressed out because of the fact that I'm going through a freaking divorce. And on top of this incident just made everything so much worse for me and my mental state. I've already spoken to my lawyer and have decided to file for a restraining order as well, since it's very clear that my husband has become unhinged and I don't feel safe with him out there anymore. I've been feeling as if I'm not even safe in my own home, which is saying something. And my parents are also quite concerned about my well-being right now as well, since I've been quite shaken up since then. I do feel a little guilty that he's going through so much, but I also know that this is not my fault. He is the one who cheated on me, and that's what I keep reminding myself time and again so that I don't soften up towards him or anything, even for a second. I'm also considering therapy so that I can deal with my feelings about this whole situation. I feel emotionally drained, and I'm just genuinely done with him and his drama. I'm just hoping that this whole thing is over soon because I can't have things like this happening to me. I'm just done with this. Update 3. Last week, my divorce finally came through. There wasn't much of a case since my husband had tried to hurt me, and There was proof of him being emotionally involved with another woman. He didn't have to stay in prison for a long time, even though he tried to hurt me, since it was his first offense and he hadn't managed to hurt me at all, so he got off with a misdemeanor. That was a little disappointing for me to know, but there was nothing that I could do about it. He can't bother or harass me anymore, though, since I now have a restraining order against my ex-husband, so he literally cannot touch me. The last time we met was at court, and he made sure to yell out awful things about me for the very last time. I managed to ignore it since I'm trying to move on, and speaking to him is absolutely pointless. However, to my surprise, his mother got in touch with me right after our divorce was finalized and asked to meet me. I agreed, knowing what she had done. We met for coffee near my house, and she apologized to me for everything that her son had done and told me that she wanted to transfer the inheritance to me instead. Of course, I wasn't entitled to that and declined it, as nice as the offer was. Plus, I was already getting a substantial amount of alimony and compensation from my ex-husband, and that was all the satisfaction I needed. Instead, I suggested that she leave it all to charity, and she seemed to think it was a good idea as well. Meeting her also gave me the opportunity to properly thank her for whatever she'd done, because not a lot of mothers would be able to punish their own sons and would probably even try to blame their daughter-in-law instead. So I was really grateful for that, and I made sure that she knew. We parted amicably, and she told me not to hesitate if I ever needed any help, which was just so sweet of her. And as everyone knows, I've been living with my parents ever since I found out about my husband's affair, which was almost 3 months ago. I started my job 1.5 months ago, and it's been going pretty well. I've already started looking for a place in spite of my parents insisting that I live with them for as long as I want to. I'm trying to come to terms with the fact that I'm divorced now, and my husband turned out to be a completely different man than I'd expected him to be. I've heard from a few of our common friends that he's single now, since amidst the whole divorce drama, he'd publicly announced his relationship with his coworker, but she denied it altogether and stayed with her husband instead. Well, serves him right. But whatever, it's not my business anymore, and I'm glad I got rid of him. The only person I'm going to love now is myself. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself. This could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.